Hello legends. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to code using ChatGPT Projects. Now I've got loads of experience coding with Claude projects where I've built out custom coded AI callers, I built out web apps, automation scripts. I've done all this kind of stuff where I sell it for people that come to me from YouTube. I make automation scripts for myself. I just build things out for fun. And I've got this protocol that I follow. It's very simple, but it is a series of steps that I follow when I'm coding, and I have a process behind it. So I've got a prompt that I use, custom instructions. I've got a method to actually going through the document, like the API documentation and figuring out what information I need. And then I've got a method for debugging as well. I'd say 25% is knowing what you want to build, 25% is knowing how to read the documentation, and then 50% is probably debugging, like when you're coding. So I'm going to show you my exact step-by-step sequence of how to code in a project's environment, obviously tailored to ChatGPT in this video. And we're also going to be going through an example of coding something up as well. So you're going to see a live start to finish of this whole thing. Okay, let's get into it. All right, so let's look at these 7 steps or 7 guidelines for coding within ChatGPT Projects. Now, before I get into the 7 steps, I want to speak about why ChatGPT Projects is actually a great place to code within. So my main coding tool is Cursor. So Cursor AI is a tool that lets you write code and run code. In ChatGPT and Claude directly, you can only write the code, but you cannot run the code. That's why a lot of my videos I speak about Cursor or VS Code, actually less frequently VS Code, or Replit. Replit, it lets you run the code online, so it's accessible 24/7. But yeah, I do a lot of my coding within something like Cursor, where you can have an AI chat, and I'm using Claude, or I use ChatGPT as well. But you have a chat, and you can have all of your files for your website, your app, or whatever listed here. So if you're building a website, you might have like 5, 10 files. If you're building an app, you might have 20 files, right? And you can add all those files to the context of this AI chat, and you can keep having new chats, new chats, new chats. And then you can also set up custom instructions that your AI will follow, which I've got over here. This is like, typical instructions. So you've got a role, context, and instructions for the actual chat that you're having. So much like Cursor, if I go across to projects, the ChatGPT projects, you can see that I have a place to start a new chat. I can attach files into that specific chat, but my overarching project has got files already inserted and instructions as well. And then I can just keep having extra chats and chats and chats, and they all use the overarching context of project files and custom instructions. So that's why I like using ChatGPT or Claude for this. But yeah, so this is what we're going to be setting up in ChatGPT. So just going back to these 7 rules. So the first is we must code within a project. So this is a pretty obvious one, but yeah, we want to be within a project because we can do all these different things like add files, add custom instructions, and just keep having conversations with this context in a really easy way. We don't want to just use a regular chat window or a regular Claude window if you're in there like an actual chat itself. You don't want to just use a regular one. You want to be in a project. Next, you want to research the documentation. So like I just mentioned, 25% of the problem, or like when you're coding something, 25% of the thing you have to figure out is what you want as the output. What are you actually building here? The next 25% of effort comes from reading the documentation and understanding the documentation. So a lot of people I'm finding are just like people that don't know how to code will go to ChatGPT or use one of these autonomous coding tools like Replit AI or Bart or whatever, and they try and code and they just type in like, hey, build me an app that plugs into Google Sheets, it adds my stuff to Shopify, and then it does X, Y, and Z. Like it's going to be a lifesaver automatically. And it's not the case right now. I think for front-end development, like making a beautiful website, those tools do a great job. It looks nice, you click the buttons, it all works nicely. But the back end of plugging into APIs, processing data, that's complicated. And that's where I see the most struggle with people is just understanding like, why isn't this app working? It looks good, I press the button, but it's not working. It's because the back end is not plugged in. So in this video, we're gonna be looking at the back end, which is the documentation, the API documentation, and every tool that you wanna plug into will have this documentation. It's very easy to read. It's very easy to use as well. And I'm going to show you a simple way that I use it when I'm actually prompting, ChatGPT to code for me. Then we have provide context in the custom instructions. So always custom instructions, you must have them there. And I typically will put maybe the same instructions that I have from my cursor into there. So we just copy this, but I might also put additional like job to be done or task that we're doing And if you're building a website, you might say, we're building a website for X and Y use case. Or if you're building an automation, you might say, we're building an automation that does A, B, and C. So it's really important to put it there. So we have the overarching guardrails installed. Sorry about that. Then we have include custom files if needed. So look, if you're starting a brand new project, like building a website from scratch, you probably won't have any files, but you'll have some instructions. But as you have your chat and you build your first file, which is like, hey, build me a HTML page that has a display image of me, then it has all my accreditation, and then it has a nav bar on top. Okay, you'll get that file, it'll be made, and then you can take that file and then just add it to your project files. And then when you make a new chat and you say, cool, now I want to make a contact us page in the same style and format as my main homepage, then you're going to have your homepage in context for your second chat. So it's actually, I would advise definitely as you go through your chat and you update your files or your instructions should change, you definitely just change these during the course of your coding, 100%. Like you might start with 2 files now, but after 5 chats, you might have 6 or 7, and you want to add them into there so that your other chats are basically using those new files. Now, another use case of how you would actually add files is for one of my videos that I posted, I found Replit on their GitHub, not Replit, sorry. Twilio on their GitHub had a code that integrates a custom GPT, a ChatGPT, so OpenAI with 11 Labs and DeepGram to make a custom coded AI caller. And I found that GitHub repo, but it was like 20 or 30 files, and that was way too complicated for me to use. So I uploaded all those 20 or 30 files into a project, and then I basically instructed saying, hey, we're gonna break this down. Instead of doing X, Y, and Z use case, we just want X. And then when I had my chat, I was like, cool, let's figure out how to take all these 20 or 30 files and break them down to only 3 or 4 that we really need to run this simple use case. So there's multiple ways that you can actually use projects to your advantage. Like we could upload all the files and then simplify them down, or you can have no files and then build them out. So this is very dynamic, and I think it's extraordinary. So we have files if we need, code in plain English. So if you're already coding right now, you're probably already familiar with this, but just code in plain English. And in this example, we're going to be using we're going to be making some API calls for OpenAI. We're not going to be coding, like writing some technical words down. We're just going to be saying basic steps and just copying and pasting the documentation amidst our basic plain English steps. And it's going to work perfectly fine. So code in plain English. Now 6 and 7. So if you, like I mentioned before, 25% of the workload is from understanding what output you want. 25% is from understanding the documentation. 50% is debugging. So like I mentioned, when people use tools like Bart or something like that, or Replit AI agent, it's very common that they'll put some basic instructions down, and then when it doesn't work, aka the backend's not plugged in, the API call isn't made, they might not even realize they have to authenticate an API call, which is super, super common. That I see that all the time. That's where you have to know how to debug. So for us, 50% of the problem is being able to debug the actual code. And the first tip we have for debugging is adding in little statements that when your code is being executed, at each major component, you're able to see, hey, we're at this stage, we're at this stage, we're at this stage. And then when you plug those, if there's an error and you plug it into AI and you say, here's the logs that we have, here's the code that we have, which it has to have 10 steps. And here's the output of the code, which is only gone up to step 3. Then the AI is it's very easy to see, okay, well, we messed up at step 3, or we're messing up at the start of step 4. That's where we should focus. So logs are really, really good. And even if you're not using AI, this is how regular developers will code as well, with some logs. And you don't have to have the logs there the entire time. When you actually make your website or app or your automation, when you actually make it live and you deploy it, you can get rid of all the logs if you want to as well. So this is just for building. And tip number 2. So it's very common for, it's still very common for me when I'm coding and I run into an issue and I cannot resolve it within the first 1 or 2 tries, that the AI chat that I'm in will kind of start looping over the same resolutions, even if they're incorrect. Kind of like when you watch those kids cartoons and they're walking around in a forest, and then someone's like, hey, I feel like we've passed that tree 10 times. That's what happens here as well. It's very real. So it's difficult to kind of realize at the very start when it is happening. But the way to get out of this, my best method is to get out of that chat and start a new chat. So once again, you can see here, if we have all the context with the instructions and project files, and we're having a chat and it's kind of getting in that loop, it's so easy to start a new chat, maybe update some of our files or instructions, start a new chat, and then you can try and resolve the issue a bit faster there. And the main resolution there is that we're kind of clearing the mind. So we're kind of letting go of the previous chat and all that previous context and all the errors we may be kind of refeeding back in every time we ask a question. Now we have a totally blank, like clean slate to work off. So those are the main, these are the main tips that I have, or guidelines, rules, whatever you want to call them. And they work extraordinarily well. I've had lots of success with, using projects for Claude. Also, again, it's like 80% similar to how you would code in something like Cursor. So if you don't know how to use Cursor, you're a little bit intimidated by it at the start. I've got some videos on my profile anyway, but you can start to, code or just practice coding using ChatGPT Projects as a stepping stone to a bigger tool later on. But even if you never use Cursor, you just use something like Replit or a different, if you're using VoiceFlow and you need to write little bits of code for automations within VoiceFlow, again, ChatGPT Project, there's a lot of use cases for this as well. So for our example, I'm going to run through a basic one. So I'm going to go back to here and open up our sidebar and open up a new project. And I'm going to call this new project, hit create, and close this. And I'm going to change the color to gold. So for this example, I am not going to do a website. I'm not going to do a complicated app. Really what I want you to see is mainly these rules, explanation of why ChatGPT Projects is pretty cool in the context of Cursor. And then we're going to be doing a very basic example of how to interact with a ChatGPT completion step, kind of like we're messaging ChatGPT just one time and getting a response back. So we're going to write that. Code. I'm going to show you how to go into the documentation and find the actual API call and how to write in plain English. I'm also going to write some custom instructions for us to use. And then I'm going to go across to Cursor and actually run the code so you can see full picture, how to start the process and how to finish the process. So to start with, we have our project created. We're working within a project. The documentation I'll get to in a second. Provide the context and the custom instructions. So let's go to custom instructions here. And I'm just going to say, actually, I'm going to copy my instructions from here, from Cursor. And I'm just going to go Control A, all this stuff, paste it into here. So these instructions at a high level, it's basically saying, hey, you're a JavaScript programmer, you're helping someone code. And when you code, here's all beginner principles and guidelines. Basically assuming that me, the person that is coding and using this assistant, is very new to coding, don't know how to code, give me all the help, that I need, put the training wheels on. So you can pause this and get the prompt as well. But this will be enough for us. That's actually my core prompt that I use for all of my Cursor coding. We don't have any code in here. We don't need any code in here right now. And I could probably go into here and say, hey, when we're using ChatGPT completions, let me just go and find this. So from OpenAI, sorry to be jumping around so much, but from OpenAI, I'm going to go into their API reference, which is it's called sometimes developer documentation, API docs, all this stuff has got similar names like that. But this is where you find all the API information that you need to make API calls. So in their introduction page here, they've got some sample information about how to actually make basic API calls. What we want to do is we want to find chat endpoint. So this is basically like just sending one message and getting one response back. And we want to use the create chat completion. So basically this is like going into a ChatGPT window, sending one message and getting a response back. So we're just going to run this basic API call. Now it's not so important exactly the example that we're doing here. So I don't want to focus on the example. I want to focus on the fact that we're in a documentation right now. The OpenAI documentation is a little bit more difficult to really follow along with, but if you're using something like HubSpot or Zendesk, it's very straightforward. It's still comprehensive. It's got a lot of API calls, but the naming convention is much easier. Like create a new ticket, send a message to the customer. It's all very easy. When you have something like audio or chat or embeddings, it's probably a little bit more complicated. But for the purposes of this example, it's just that we're in a documentation and you can see here, this is exactly how you place the API call. And this is exactly how you, what the response of that API call is. So every API call you have to place, you have to authenticate, most API calls actually. You have to authenticate them with like a secret key for your door. So no one can go into your home. They need the key for the front door. So we need the exact same thing for our API call. We need a key to actually get in and send information or receive information. And then after the API call is complete, whether we're sending information, retrieving information, deleting something, updating something, we always get a response. And different API calls have different response structures. So what I like to do is, we're just in a regular chat there. I'm in our new project. I'm just gonna, basically we're gonna create an API, a script that's gonna let us send a message across to a ChatGPT endpoint, and we're gonna get a response back. So I'm gonna say, can you create a script that will send a message to the ChatGPT endpoint and get a response back. And now I'm going to go to our documentation and I'm just going to copy this. So if I click here, I've got multiple different languages that I can code in. I'm just going to use curl. So the AI will be fine if I gave it Python or JavaScript and I'm like output the code in JavaScript that you give me. It can read any language and output in whatever language that you want. And also for here, I've got different models that I want to use, but I don't really care about that for now. For this example, I'm just going to copy the actual API call, which is all this content. And I'm going to close this. And I'm going to say to make the API call, give this example. And now the sample response is this. And this is the sample response. So whenever I write, when I'm creating automation or doing something that involves API calls, I always do it like this. I always give the actual API call sample as well as the actual response sample so that the output is using the exact specific information. And then here, I'm going to say configuration, API key, and we need to make an API key, but I don't have one here. Okay, I want to make an API key quickly. So let's go back to our information here, click the settings button, API keys, create new key, Bart --temp. I'm going to copy this. And now I'm going to go back to API reference and go back to chat. And we're back at the exact same place. Now create chat completion. So we've got these two bits of info in our chat window. And I'm going to paste this into here. So now we should get a script that we can copy into Cursor. So I'm going to close this panel and I've got dummy over here. So we have some instructions. Okay, so the instructions that I uploaded basically say, hey, I'm a beginner coder. I don't know how to do anything. Tell me what to do for each step of the way. So if I'm using Cursor for the very first time, it's going to tell me install this so you can actually complete the, you can actually run the script because this is one of the libraries that we need. This is to make API calls. And then we have the full script here. So I'm going to copy this and I want to paste it into here, which is our dummy script. Now, best practice is not putting the API key in a script like this. It's to put it in an environment variable, but for now, I'm not looking at that. I'm just this is the example that we're running through. So we have our script here, endpoint, okay, completions. We have our API key and headers for our API call. You are a helpful assistant, hello. So let's run this. Now to run this, I'm gonna write node and dummy. So Node is the engine that runs JavaScript files. That's how we can actually run this file. So I need to call the engine, then I need to call the file, which is called dummy.js. So I'm gonna write node and then dummy and hit enter. And let's see if we get a response back. Okay, so I think we did get a response back maybe, but it's very confusing. So all I'm gonna do is just copy all of this and paste it in to our response here. It'll log the full response. Okay, so this is our log. And I'm gonna say, can you only show the output message? So it should get our code and then re-edit it to basically only include the part that we wanna see, which is not all that other mumbo jumbo, but just the response output, which is the message from the assistant. And it should look something like this. So let me copy this one more time. Go back into Cursor. I want to backspace everything. And now I'm going to run this one more time. So I'm going to go node and dummy. Hello, how can I assist you today? Okay, so this is really cool. Now, for this example, I've got dummy.js. And what I'm going to do is go, okay, so we're in a new project. So now I'm going to go add files, and I'm actually going to find that file that we were just using, which is called dummy.js. So this is the file that got that response for us that said, hello, how can I assist you today? Where we're speaking with the actual ChatGPT completions. And I've added it as context. So now we have context. And at this stage, I might even want to turn this into a website. So I've got a file that can actually interact with the API in the backend that will get me a response back. And maybe I want to make a very basic front-end HTML page that will just have a box where I can write a message, click send, and then get a response back. So then, I mean, I'm not going to do it for this example, but you could go into here and then realistically, you could actually change the instructions now to say, hey, so we have a file which lets us speak with the API endpoint for ChatGPT completions. And now our next step is to create a HTML page that will let us interact with that API using a nice interface. So I'm going to leave this as it is, but that's how you would kind of keep modifying this if you were moving forward. So we've got the context of that new file. Now I'm going to say, I want to create a HTML page that has a text box that I insert a message, then a button for me to press send. And when I hit send, it executes the dummy.js file and then displays the returned message in another text box. So I should be probably much more clearer with this to basically say, make sure that all the buttons are plugging in together. But for this example, I'm going to be not so clear so that hopefully run into some issues and I can debug with you live as well. So we're looking at the backend script for dummy.js and we're creating ourselves a server and then front end index.html. Okay, so let's just follow these steps. Again, the more specific I am with this, the better we get. So it's like garbage in, garbage out. To create a HTML page that displays the return message, you can use the following approach. The example assumes that your dummy.js script is executed on the backend and communicates with your HTML page via an API endpoint. So we need to create something called server.js. So I'm just going to go this. Okay. Replace with your actual API key. Okay, we have the API key. So we have added it there as well. Perfect. Index.html. Perfect. And now we have to run this. Okay, so these are some more libraries or more things that we need to run. We need to install. Okay, perfect, that's done. And now to run this, we're going to run node server.js. So this code should actually let us, run this on a local host. So we're now running all the code that we have, the HTML page, that server. Let me just show you. We're going to be running all these 3 files on a web page here, which is being projected from our cursor environment. So I'm just going to hit run. Cannot get. Okay. Let's see, are there any options here that we needed to do? I'm just going to take a picture of this and send it into here. I would have actually done this a slightly different way, but this is where, this is where the experience of learning how to code will be very helpful for you as you go on. So it's going to say cannot get. It doesn't handle the route. Yeah, okay, so that's what I was thinking was happening here. This is not actually a route that we can call. It's not an endpoint that we can use. Here's a completed code with a fix. So let's go to server.js. Here we go, and our API key. Let me just spread it out. Add the following code. Okay, so we've already done this for server. And this should be fine. So now if I just refresh this, nope. What did it actually do here? Does the server actually serve the HTML page? Okay, well, it doesn't seem to be working. Let me just do this. This is my dummy.js. This is my index.html. And this is the server. Okay. Let's see what we get here. Project folder, server, dummy, index, yes. Server is running, access the page in your browser. You should see your index rendered. So yeah, if we just, okay, maybe we have to restart the server. That makes sense. So let me just restart this. That was just Control C to restart that. And let's go node server again. Let's go port 3000. Okay, there we go. So I just had to restart the server from scratch. So that's interesting. See, like all little learnings that even I forget sometimes is that I edited the actual main server file and I had to restart the server. So now we have a very bland looking window, but type your message. Hi there, how are you? Let's hit send. Hello, as an artificial intelligence, I don't have feelings or anything. Okay. There you go. So now what I would actually do is I would take this, I would go back into here, I would add files, and I would add these two files to the project. And now we have, again, this is very silly, but we have the backend code for interacting with our API endpoint. We've got our API key, and we're starting to build out a website here. But I'm going to stop here. I think this video is probably long enough and the example is clear on how to actually work with the documentation, on how to actually add files and dynamically keep adding files and having new chats, so that you can actually, progressively work through a project where you had one file initially, you have more files later on, custom instructions. Yeah, at this stage, you might even add another section here that says, which step or which part are we up to in our overall project. So you might say, overall, we're building out a website that does X, Y, and Z functionality. We're currently at step X and we're working on this and this. So you could really get super specific here. This is exactly how you would code. This is absolutely fantastic. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it makes sense on how to actually use Cursor, because you do need a tool to actually execute. Tool to actually execute the code that you're running. And in terms of best practices, I would definitely spend some time in ChatGPT in that chat and just say, hey, is it best practice? Like, is the code that we've got, is that best practice, or how can I actually secure it so I'm not as vulnerable if I was to run this live? But yeah, you get here exactly what we're doing. So guys, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you want to see any more coding tutorials, maybe my like how I actually build more complicated apps, if you're happy to watch longer videos, let me know. I want to kind of keep these as short as possible because I feel like they might get a little bit boring watching for too long. But if you want to watch me do some live coding, I'm happy to do that as well. So just, reply in the comments below. So please like, subscribe, comment below, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, good luck. Enjoy coding in ChatGPT Projects. See ya.